Hey everyone, it's the last of our beginner sewing series this week, so I thought we'd cover troubleshooting tips and techniques really. There's lots of little niggles that you'll find on your sewing journey that give you a little problem to step over, but quite often there's some simple solutions to overcome the sort of basic problems that you might encounter. So we'll go through a couple of issues that come up quite a lot and easy ways to try and sort them out. A lot of problems start with your sewing machine and they are a beast unto their own, but most of them are fairly straightforward and similar in terms of how you sort them out. So if you're having trouble getting the needle to go up and down, so you press the foot pedal and it's not doing this, it's just making the noise but not going up and down. One thing to make sure is that firstly your foot pedal is plugged in properly, but also that your needle is not disengaged. So on these machines, most of them are quite similar, you pull this little wheel out at the end and that stops the needle from going up and down when you put your foot down. So normally you'd use this to wind the bobbin on this machine, but quite often once you've wound the bobbin you forget to push it back in at the end. So just check that yours doesn't need to be pushed in at the end, and then the needle can go up and down again. If you've got funny stitching going on, if it seems too loose or it just doesn't look quite right, there's a few other things you can try as well. The first port of call would always be to rethread the top thread and rethread your bobbin thread down here, because sometimes they can just be slightly out and that really affects the tension on the thread so that it doesn't come out evenly. It's also really easy to put these in the wrong way, the bobbins, so it's worth taking it out and trying again, even if you think you threaded it correctly, because sometimes that's a really quick and easy fix. With the top thread, sometimes it's easy to not have it all the way into this little metal bit, so it's not putting tension there either. If you've done that and you're still finding that it's looping or that the tension seems off, you can try adjusting the tension dial. So here, the manufacturer's settings are usually a 4 or a 5. Normally you've got like a circle or a square around what the manufacturer's basic setting is. So I'd start there and adjust either way and see how the stitching comes out. That can also solve a lot of your problems. And then lastly, the last thing to check is your needle, if it's not going correctly, because you may find that your needle's bent or that you just need a different weight needle. So you can pop a different one in. The type of needle you use is also important, so make sure you've got the right one for the sort of fabric you need. And if you need to change it, you literally just unscrew it here and it will come out. There we go. And then you can put it back in, make sure the flat bit is facing the back. And then you put your new one in and try again. You should really change your needle fairly often. They recommend about every 8 hours or so of sewing. So if you're doing a lot of heavy duty sewing, then I recommend changing your needle just to see if that happens. The thing to try is also a heavier or lighter weight needle than what you've got. So as you can see, they come in different sizes here. If you've started say on an 80 and you're finding it's struggling to get through the fabric, so you've got skipped stitches, maybe try a heavier, the next number up, so like a 90. If you're having the opposite problem, then maybe try a lighter needle. But sometimes if you're working with particularly thick fabric, you just need to go up a needle size for it to cope with the thickness of the fabric. If your machine has started to make a funny noise, sometimes they start clicking or clunking a little bit, you don't have to worry straight away. It might not be the worst problem in the world. Again, try changing your needle or check your needle, because sometimes that means your needle's bent and it's just catching on something as you sew. So get a fresh needle in, rethread the bobbin again. It could be that the bobbin's not sat completely flat in the bobbin case. And the other thing you can make sure you do is to clean out the bobbin race. So if you don't clear out the bobbin race regularly, you may find that the fluff builds up in your machine and it just doesn't stitch as smoothly as possible. Some machines can cope with this. Some machines are very temperamental to the presence of dirt and dust, so that's worth doing. I'll show you how to do that on this machine really quickly, in case you've never done it before. It's worth cleaning out your machine regularly, especially if you do a lot of sewing, because you wouldn't believe how much stuff builds up in there. Your bobbin plate, you should have a little screw here, and your machine should have come with a little screwdriver. If you haven't got one, you can often use one of those mini screwdrivers, and you literally just undo the plate. can be a little bit fiddly. You can just lift the metal bit up and out. Screw your screw and take it out. Make sure your needle's in the highest position and your presser foot's up, and you should just be able to lift and remove the plate out. And then this is what you see in the bobbin race. So I'm going to take the bobbin out and the casing as it pins. So that's the casing that goes in. That seems fairly clean. And then you get a little brush that comes with the machine, or you can use any brush. As you can see, it is a little bit dusty in there, so if I just clean it out a little bit, you'll be able to see the difference that it makes. Look at all that dust. So it builds up. These machines can be a bit temperamental when they get dusty, so it's good to kind of clean them out semi-regularly. Some older machines may need oiling on some of the parts as well. Most modern machines don't really need oiling that often. So even just a tiny bit of dust like that can make such a big difference. So then you just pop everything back in and screw it up again. And so that's your main machine troubleshooting. There are other common issues that you may have that you can get a bit of help with. One of those can be sewing in a straight line, which for a beginner, I know it sounds simple, but it does take a bit of practice. But one of the things that you might find that helps with that is a seam guide. We've got them here, so I'll just go grab one. On the back, they do recommend not to use them for a digital machine, but it's up to you if you want to. Some people use them and find they're fine. Other people are worried that it's going to damage the computerized part. So basically the magnet sits on the plate, the metal plate of your machine at the seam guide, so it's a little bit easier for a beginner to see where they need to sew. So say I've got 15mm seam allowance, I'll pop it there and then just butt my fabric up against it as I'm sewing, for example. Then I know that I've just got to keep my fabric against this the whole time, which helps keep it nice and straight because it's harder to veer off when you've got that nice sturdy thing in place. So they're really handy. Lots of people also struggle with speed and sewing. Don't forget that you can slow it right down on your machine. Most of them have a speed adjuster on the foot, so it's literally just like a slow fast switch to the side one way or another, so make sure that's on slow. A lot of machines will also have, or some of them will have, a slide adjuster on the actual machine for the speed. This one doesn't, but some of the more advanced machines do, so you can slow that right down to help you not put your foot down too fast and go whizzing away too quickly. Much better to start slow and increase the speed as you gain your confidence. Another good tip is if you're sewing corners or curves, don't forget to utilise the presser foot to help you. So it's really easy when you're doing these to kind of try and force it round without lifting the presser foot, but actually go a bit slower, leave your needle in the fabric and let that help you. Just lift the presser foot up to help ease the fabric around a little bit easier, especially for curves. That stops it kind of scrunching up as you go around the curve. I'll show you what I mean. On a nice sharp corner, you just make sure that your fabric, that your needle is left in the fabric, and then you're going to pivot. So lift the presser foot. As you can see, the needle's still in the fabric, and then turn it 90 degrees and put the presser foot back down, and you've got a perfect corner there, and you can just carry on sewing straight this way. If you're trying to sew a curve, again, you can lift it up. And then you can just ease as you go round. So you can sew a little bit and then lift it up, ease it round a little bit more, put it down. And when you're doing this, it's literally only moving the fabric maybe a couple of millimeters each time as you do it, just to help you get round the circular bit of the curve, but it can help it stop the fabric kind of bunching up as you go. The other problems you may have is with your fabric going under the machine. So if it's eating up a little bit at the start, don't try and start right on the edge of your fabric. Just start a little way in, back stitch, and then go over it again. That can help avoid that problem. If you've got a fabric that just doesn't want to go under the machine, maybe it's quite fine or quite slippery, you can layer it with a bit of tissue paper underneath and on top that you can tear away once you've done the stitching. That's quite helpful for problem fabrics that go under the machine. And then the last thing is that if you're having trouble with pins, if your fabric's moving a lot, or if you've got a fabric that's easily damaged, so very fine fabric and the pins are leaving holes or marks, then you can also use fabric clips, which are really useful. They're also really good for bulky fabrics where it's really hard to get your pins in because it's so thick. So they're very easy, they just clip on, they're pretty cheap as well, you can get them, we sell them, but you can get them loads of places, and they just hold everything together. Great for jersey as well, where you get curled ends. These are the clips, and they literally have a little hinge in them. So where you would normally pin these two pieces together here, instead you can clip it. So you literally just open the clip and put it together both sides, and this will hold it in place as you stick it under the machine. They're quite popular with quilters, but I often find them good for fine dressmaking fabrics as well. So you can sew them like this and then just take them off as you sew. So yeah, really good for bulky fabrics and fine fabrics where you don't want the pin marks, because obviously these don't leave so much of them, they don't pierce the fabric, so they don't leave a mark. So those are my top tips for troubleshooting. If you've got any of your own top tips, please leave them in the comments below. And we really hope that this beginners series has been helpful for all of you that are learning to sew or coming back to sewing after a long break.